there's always going to be narcissists in this world. They are always going to be toxic. You just need to shift that dynamic and really remember that the narcissist is way more afraid of you than you are of them. That's why you need to focus on you being on the offensive. I always say that football teams don't score points, but on the defense, they score on the offensive. And so focus on you, and that's how you end up winning.
You have a phenomenal story. You've been phenomenally successful, overcome phenomenal adversity early stage, and you somehow managed to niche down into an area of the economy that I think we need to put in public schools, which is everything from negotiation to narcissism. How did you even get into that, niche down into that zone?
Well, kind of by accident as everybody does, the things that happen, what you think is going to be to you end up happening for you. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, I ended up dealing with a narcissist, and it was actually after I had become a successful attorney. Mm-hmm. I had merged my practice with two other guys a couple of years ago, thinking, okay, I'm going to become an entrepreneur and do some other things. And I ended up in a business partnership with a female covert passive aggressive narcissist. And it was one of the most horrible, heinous experiences of my life. It brought back feelings of when I had been bullied as a kid. Mm-hmm. I was sick at night, nauseous, filled with anxiety, and I literally couldn't sleep. It was horrible. And I didn't know that she was a narcissist. I just knew that I was obsessed with what was going on. Yeah. And somebody mentioned to me that this person was a narcissist. So I had already been talking about negotiation for many years. I had lectured on negotiation. That's really how I built my law practice. Mm-hmm. So once I started learning about narcissism, I started applying what I was learning about narcissism to what I already knew about negotiation. And it was like I had discovered penicillin. I actually started seeing movement in these cases. I started to get these toxic people to do things. Then when COVID hit and I couldn't practice law anymore, I started talking about how to negotiate with narcissists on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I literally had no views whatsoever initially when I was just talking about negotiation. Yeah. And then when I started to talk about how to negotiate with a narcissist, all of a sudden I was getting all these views. And here I am, not even 3 years later, and I have 35 million views on YouTube. So that's
and hundreds of thousands of subscribers, I might add.
Hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Yeah. I've sold thousands and thousands of my Slayer negotiation with a narcissist program. And I've built a multi-million-dollar business around it. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, I've helped millions of people. I mean, the letters, the notes, the emails, the DMs that I get every single day, literally pour in every single day. You've saved my life. I was in a dark place. I was in despair. You've opened my eyes. I was going to commit suicide. Now I know what I'm dealing with. I mean, I get the chills every single day. That's the more meaningful piece for me. That's why I do what I do. That's why I run to work every single day.
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings the question is, I mean, I'm curious to know maybe from your perspective, why you think it struck such a chord, or maybe I don't know if there's even a statistic out there that basically says so much of the population would fall on the narcissism spectrum. What kind of research have you done so far?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a brand new book coming out this year, so I've done a lot of research on it now. Mm-hmm. It's roughly 15% of the population is either narcissistic or has a personality disorder that lacks empathy. Mm-hmm. So it could be antisocial personality disorders or other types of personality disorders that cause people to just lack empathy in general. Mm-hmm. And if each one of those people emotionally abuses just 3 people in their lifetimes, then that would be 158 million Americans or 3.4 billion people on the planet. So it's really roughly half of us end up being affected by, people like this. And so that's a lot of people on the planet. And I am a person who is offering not just here's what a narcissist is, here's what you're dealing with. I'm offering real resources. I'm offering negotiation tips, tricks, strategies, tactics, so because I am an attorney, because I have, achieved a lot of success as an attorney. So, what I'm offering is something very, very unique to people. And I think that that's why I have achieved a lot of success in this space.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I've watched a ton of your videos, like I don't know anybody else that positions the content that you do and the way that you do and how helpful it actually is. I was looking at a couple of them just recently talking about, how to actually not just negotiate, but I'll pick up on the signals. Like, how do you recognize a narcissist in front of you? Like how to figure out like what narcissist supply was. That was the first time I ever heard the word narcissist supply, and then try to figure it out. Like, okay, I'm like going through my head. I'm like, ooh, I bet that and that person and that person and that person, like all of that kind of stuff itself. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if now and again in my lifetime I fell on the spectrum at some point in time, right? But I'm curious to know, like, how does one begin to recognize that they're actually talking to a narcissist when love bombing happens, and like you distinguish love bombing from just being in love, kind of thing?
Oh, well, love bombing is a very specific thing. Love bombing has nothing to do with love. Love bombing is a form of manipulation. Love bombing is a way to get somebody to be in somebody's spectrum of control. So it is it's an immediate form of let's get to the next level as fast as possible. So the reason why that you're being love bombed is because it feels like pressure. It feels like overwhelm. It feels like you can't breathe. You're being swept off your feet, even if it's a business relationship, by the way. And when I look back to the business partnership that I was in, it was like that. It was, let's get to that next level immediately. You don't have time to think. And when you do try to push back at all, they always have something to say. You're not allowed to really have space to breathe because they don't want you to have that space to breathe. It's why wait? Why think? Everything is perfect. It's all lining up. Look at the stars. We are soulmates. Look at how perfect it is. There's no reason to wait. We've waited long enough in our lives to get to this point. We should go to Vegas to get married. We should, you don't have that time. You don't have that space. We should be moving in. We should be signing contracts. We should be getting to that next level because they want to get ensconced as soon as possible into your life because they want to start making withdrawals. It's the point is not to be making deposits. It's to get to the point of taking withdrawals as soon as possible.
Does it seem like that? I'm just trying to think about some of the folks that would consider falling on the spectrum myself, working with folks along the way. Will they often also like start interjecting themselves and start cutting off other relationships?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Kind of give me an idea of kind of what you've seen there.
Well, they'll start to say things like, your family members aren't really for you, or that friend isn't really your friend. That person doesn't really have your back, or I've seen that person not, or that employee doesn't really have your back. I do. Look at all the things that I'm doing for you. They'll line themselves up so that it makes it seem like they're the ones who are taking care of you and not these other people, or why are you spending so much time with them? We should really be the ones who have the relationship. Why are you, you shouldn't be spending so much time with that person. We should be the ones spending time together. And I noticed that with other people who end up in relationships with narcissists, all of a sudden you notice that they're not hanging out with their friends anymore, and yeah, it is a spectrum. It is a spectrum. I always joke that it's, narcissistic personality on one side, and then whoever you think is the perfect person on the other side, Dalai Lama, Jesus Christ, or Buddha, or whoever, is on the other side, and all the rest of us are in the middle somewhere. And of course, it does fluctuate. If you're sick or whatever, you feel more selfish, you're hungry or whatever, you do sort of get more toward that. But, it's that empathy factor. Do you have the ability to feel empathy for another human being? If somebody's dog got run over, do you feel something about that for another human being? Does that bother you? Do you, does that hurt you in some way?
Yeah.
Do you feel that pain? Or do you pretend? Do you think, I should feel something for that, but I don't? That's narcissists know that they should, and they can, a lot of times they take cues for it, but they don't actually feel anything. That's, narcissists don't have the ability to feel empathy.
Now, I'm curious. I've worked with enough folks now to realize that some people have just been through, for lack of a better word, hell on earth. Like they've been through circumstances or situations that appear to crush their emotional ability to be emotional or feel emotion, almost as a protective mechanism. Is there a tool that would help us recognize someone who has just been through very difficult traumas and have, for lack of a better word, become cold-hearted, so to speak, versus someone who legitimately just doesn't have empathy?
I'm not a psychologist to be able to say, hey, this person's a narcissist or this person isn't or whatever. But I can just say that these are the, you go to the DSM-5 and these are the things that they use to diagnose whether or not somebody is a narcissist.
Yeah.
And, and if somebody has been diagnosed as a narcissist, then, here's what, you're dealing with.
Yeah.
But what I can do is say, okay, if somebody is a narcissist, here's how you have to deal with them. Here's how you have to communicate with them. Here's how you have to negotiate with them.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I thought it was good. It was a good try to I'm trying to help piece together, at least for the, almost in a kind of a selfish way, of the folks that I've kind of, related with along the way that, hindsight being 2020, I wish I'd never gotten involved with, whether that's business or whether that's, personal relationships. And as I'm kind of going through that, I'm also thinking, okay, there's people that I've met that from day one, I'm like, I got my spidey senses tingling. I kind of know better. So either I pull back or maybe I interject. And there's other people that I'm like, hey, wait a minute. This wasn't this type of relationship like 6 months ago. Like, where is this coming from? Like, is there an example of narcissists that are more upfront versus more that are almost like a Scud missile?
Oh, 100%. 100%. So there's a covert narcissist and then there's grandiose narcissists.
Okay.
And, I think the covert narcissists are way worse than the grandiose narcissists. Because the grandiose narcissists are much easier to spot. They're the ones that I think of as what I call the garden variety narcissists. They're the ones that, they walk into the room. They demand the best tables. They tell everybody how great they are. They are holding court. They're the ones that I actually always sort of thought of as the narcissist. Before I dealt with this covert passive aggressive narcissist in my mind, and this is why, I think lawyers definitely need to be educated on who narcissists are, because I certainly didn't know until a couple of years ago. But I kind of always thought of narcissists as, misogynistic men. Basically, that was sort of who a narcissist was in my mind. I did not realize that narcissists could be women. I didn't realize they could be covert, passive aggressive. That's not who I thought a narcissist was in my mind. Yeah. But narcissists can certainly be covert. They can be men, and women can be covert as well, by the way. Yeah. And what a covert narcissist is somebody who on the surface seems lovely, wonderful. They can be clergy. They can be lawyers. They can be doctors. They can be as charming can be. Everybody else in the world thinks they are the most wonderful, charismatic, amazing people on the planet. But underneath the surface, there's this rage. There's this boiling feeling, where there's this competitive, jealous, underlying person that is just right under the surface. And they don't show this person to hardly anybody except for whoever their target is, whoever that person is that's right there. And that's what I dealt with in this business partner. And it comes out in very passive aggressive ways, very, very subtle ways. And there's always this plausible deniability that goes with it so that their hands are sort of clean, So the types of things that they do can't really come back to them, they'll agree to do things, for example. Absolutely, I will do that. Of course. And then they just don't do it. And you're left going, okay, should I say something to them? How long should I wait to say something? And then, you're the nice person and everybody else thinks they're nice. And how much should I nag? But it's passive. That's a passive aggressive move, right? Little things like that, but then it's death by 1,000 cuts because they do it little things like that over and over and over again, withholding information. They just didn't tell you. They forgot to tell you about the meeting that you were supposed to be at that was really, really important, that you just didn't end up showing up at. I meant to tell you. Oh, I didn't tell you about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Those kinds of things.
So is it safe to say then that on the flip side, they'd be the first one to try to hold you accountable? Like, in other words, you owe me?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. And then they'll take credit for all the work that you did, like when they didn't do the stuff that they were supposed to do. So then you end up doing it because you were supposed, remember the thing that they were supposed to do that they didn't end up doing. So you end up doing all the work for them. They'll be the first one to take credit for your work. Look at all that we did. Yeah. That's your covert narcissist. That's your covert. They'll even put their name first. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think that it sounds like the covert is probably the most dangerous. And I don't know. It's hard to figure out when you're being, as a person, when you're being manipulated, or you're just having, positive influence. And I kind of got at least my test is like, do I feel icky? Do I feel icky afterwards? Yeah, exactly.
If I feel like I've got some kind of like a spiritual residue or energy residue on myself or something like that, I kind of realize, okay, that's not somebody I want to spend a lot of time with. And I begin to kind of distance myself. My heart kind of goes out to people that are maybe they're already in a relationship with a narcissist, or maybe they're in a relationship, in business relationship with a narcissist. Like, how do we help them, like, maybe begin to kind of like heal is a good word, I think. Maybe exit is a good word. Like, what advice would we give them?
That is one of the toughest things, honestly, because it's almost like a drug addict. They have to want it.
Yeah.
Because here's what I have found with people in relationships with narcissists. They end up defending that person. They end up almost, there's like red flags for themselves that you have to almost give them. Like, if you find yourself like defending that person, they had a tough childhood. They had a bad day. They, because you almost have to defend yourself. Like I found like, for me, like you almost want to defend the fact that you're in this relationship with this person, and it's your own sort of self-respect and preservation. Yeah. Why am I still here?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did I end up here? And so, when somebody notices, you kind of don't want to almost admit, why am I in this relationship that may be bad for me?
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a touchy situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, it seems like that, I guess at the root cause of that, there's some guilt and some shame. Guilt that maybe you entered into this relationship, shame that you've realized it, or I'm just thinking of some of the folks that I feel like may have fallen on the spectrum, and they had a really good hooking mechanism, if you will, to make me feel guilty, make me feel shameful, for stuff that, I had no part of or a piece of or something like that. So it seems like they'd be able to compound that just as easy. And the ones that I've seen, they very quickly can turn the influence into manipulation. So they see that you're beginning to pull away. They see that you're taking the good steps. They see that you're like starting to kind of like figure it out, and hey, maybe I shouldn't. And then it's almost like they start the love bombing phase all over again.
Oh, they absolutely do. And it's just push pull. I call it the push pull, because they push you away, too. They start ghosting you. They start treating you badly. They start devaluing you as a way to control you.
Yeah.
And they push you away. And then as soon as you start going, you know what, that's it, I don't need this. Yeah. Then they start pulling you back in. They start love bombing you again. And this is in a business relationship too, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's this massive toxic stew. And so, your head is constantly spinning. It's horrible.
Well, I can see why the work's definitely touched a chord. I can see why I enjoy the videos, why I enjoy the content myself, why I follow you on Instagram and everything. Your work is profound. Like that there's just a unique way in which you look at everything from negotiation to the techniques of relatability, of almost finding a way to work with a narcissist without necessarily getting injured yourself. Right. There's definitely a framework there. I want to talk about the new book a little bit. So talk to me about the new book. Like, why now? Like, kind of what is your hope? What's your heart for this book?
Well, so the new book is called Slay the Bully: How to Negotiate with a Narcissist and Win. And it's for anybody who's dealing with a narcissist, whether it's, not just divorce, but also in the workplace, anywhere that you're dealing with a narcissist. Because now's the time. I mean, it feels like it's an epidemic at this point. And I just really want to impact as many people as possible. I'm so excited that Chris Voss is now on board with me. He, in fact, just finished the foreword, and
so cool.
He and I are going to be doing some more things together because it's time that we now touch as many people as possible. You know, I really want to get this in the hands of as many people as possible. I really want to help everybody because there's so many people in pain. There's just so many people in pain from if you don't deal with the trauma, and narcissists are in trauma, they have been traumatized as children themselves. And that's what I learned in doing my research, that narcissism is not something that happened genetically. It happened because of something that happened in their childhood. And, when people don't address their trauma, they end up bleeding out on everybody else.
Hurt people.
Hurt people. And that is what is happening. And they just cause so much pain for people. And I just know the pain and suffering that it caused me, not just the one narcissist that I mentioned, but I've had to deal with many other narcissists now looking back in my life.
Yeah, for sure.
And, I was bullied as a kid, and just on and on from there. And because I've dealt with it, not just in my law practice, but personally, I feel, that I've been chosen on a divine level. And I know that sounds so trite and so corny. And so
not when you study your content the way I have. Like, it's very clear that you have a very specific gift in this area, which is, I just think, is profound.
Yeah. And so I feel humbled to be called to be doing this. I feel like if you look at everything that's happened in my life, I feel like it's all lined up for me to be doing this, and that this is what my mission is at this point, to help people. And that, as a lawyer and as all the things that have happened to me, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and teaching people how to negotiate with narcissists. And so that is what I do. And so that is the name of my book. And that is what I am doing now. So the strategy piece is the S for slay. Is S is strategy, L is leverage, A is anticipate what the narcissist is going to do and be 2 steps ahead of them. And then Y is focus on you. And the Y piece is actually in 2 parts, which is you being on the offensive, and then you and your mindset. 99% of a negotiation is won before you even walk into the room. And so I spend a lot of time on you and your mindset, and you and negotiating your best life. And I always say that the very first negotiation that you do in a day is the one that you do with yourself when you wake up in the morning, because, you have to have the right mindset first thing in the morning. And so that is what slay is, slay your negotiation with a narcissist. And there's a lot that goes into that, but that's what it is.
I'm excited. I really am. I mean, like, again, I think you've touched the nerve with so many folks. So I think at some level we have all experienced and or experiencing a narcissistic behavior system out of someone else. I think one of the things that's always gotten me in trouble is I've been told I wear my heart on my sleeve and I have a big heart. So with those 2 things in common, in the times that I've gotten addressed, I guarantee you that I've been, quote, love bombed back into a relationship because I'm made to feel like, it's my fault, or, I'm somehow not helping them or hurting them. And it has made me kind of wonder, is it possible for a narcissist themselves to get healing, and I'm not sure if your work has taken you down that pathway yet, but is there ever a point, that yes, it's like you can believe that the narcissist is working on themselves, like to heal themselves or kind of like, somehow get themselves into a better position to be normal is not the right word, but be a higher functioning adult?
They say that they really aren't able to be rehabilitated unless, they hit bottom and, because they're not self-aware. Mm-hmm. And so, they would have to be, go into deep therapy and do all the things that narcissists have to do. And they,
which is admitting you're wrong, I guess. You're admitting there's a problem.
Exactly. And, by their very nature, they just don't do that. So, mm-hmm. In general, no. I mean, I just tell people don't sit around and wait for that. Yeah. That's why I tell people to focus on themselves. I always say there's always going to be narcissists in this world. They are always going to be toxic. Yeah. So that's why you need to focus on you being on the offensive. I always say that football teams don't score points on the defense. They score on the offense.
That's true. That's very true.
Offensive. Yeah. Right. And so focus on you and that's how you end up winning. So, and by the way, narcissists do target empaths because that's how they get supply, mm-hmm. and one of the things I often say is they don't attach themselves to you because you have so little value. They mm-hmm. attach themselves to you because you have so much. Yeah. I mean, they don't want the clearance rack stuff. They want the good stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, that's, they're not stupid. They're opportunists. Yeah. So think about that, even though they're devaluing you. Yeah. So you just need to shift that dynamic and really remember that the narcissist is way more afraid of you than you are of them. And so when you're shifting that dynamic, it's just a matter of righting that ship. I mm-hmm. kind of think of it as like turning that ship around. So, I always say step 1, don't run. Step 2, make a U-turn, and step 3, break free. And so you're just kind of turning it around. It just takes some baby steps, but that's what I teach you how to do.
Well, and we have to have a coach for that because I can tell you it doesn't come natural, right? When you've been going down a certain direction with a relationship, whether it's business or personal, for any number of years or months or weeks, even, it's really hard to, turn around and stand your ground, so to speak. Like, and then know what to do in that moment to not get, the backlash. I'm thinking about the one or two that I've seen that when challenged, they went from like influence or manipulation into full blown rage, anger.
Correct.
Which is dangerous.
It takes baby steps. And that's why, you weren't conditioned overnight and you're having to condition them back. Yeah. But it's like having a baby who is having a tantrum, and when toddlers have tantrums, you're conditioning them to stop having the tantrum, mm-hmm. but they're always the worst right before they're ready to give up. That's what you are doing with a narcissist. Same thing.
I love it. Rebecca, you're amazing. I can't appreciate you so much for stepping into this. I mean, the fact that you have the response that you've gotten over the last several years of stepping into this with your full heart, I think just goes to show that this world needs this message. It needs this next level. It needs, there are a lot of really good people that are getting really injured on a regular basis because they don't have the tools and the skills that you provide, both on your channel as well as a Slay, right? So where can everybody find out more about you and like how to connect, and then also obviously more about Slay?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram and I'm on YouTube. Definitely check out my YouTube channel. And also, if anybody wants to pre-order my book, they can do that. slaythebully.com. I have lots and lots of bonuses there, including, even though the book doesn't come out till October, if you pre-order now, you can actually get an entire manuscript. You can get lots of bonuses, including a masterclass and things that are worth up to close to $400, I think. So go to slaythebully.com and grab that. And my YouTube channel is Rebecca Zung ESQ, I think. And then as well, you can find me on Instagram at Rebecca Zung. So, and TikTok even now. So
rock on. Well, I know it's going to do terrific because again, I think the world needs it. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you big time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. You are amazing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that for sure. All right, guys, that'll go do it for today's Unstoppable with Steven, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. I hope you liked that video. And if you did, make sure you check out this next video right here.